Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in our complimentary webinar series for U.S. federal government contractors. We are coming to you live today from Washington, D.C. You probably found out about today's webinar through our newsletter, which reaches over 23,000 federal government contractors and service providers. Today's session is complimentary and also recorded. You can find the recording on our website and YouTube channel about 24 hours after the webinar. We have over 525 complimentary webinars on our YouTube channel. This includes all 52 parts of the FAR and all 52 parts of the DFARS, as well as hundreds of webinars and strategic and tactical topics. If you would like to advertise in our newsletter or in any upcoming webinars, please email us at hello@jenniferschaus.com. A little bit about us. We are a specialized consulting firm focused on working with established federal contractors. We work with product, service, and software firms across the globe. For more information about our services, please visit our website and select About Us. As mentioned, today's webinar is covering the FAR supplement, and it is complimentary and also recorded. We began this series in January 2022, and you can find these past recordings on our website, as well as future schedule and registration links. As you can see here, we have covered several of the FAR supplements already, and we'll wind down the series on August 24th with the Veterans Administration. Then on Fridays, we cover the same agency or department in a Playbook series. The Friday webinars discuss upcoming bidding opportunities, contracting trends, small business resources, and sometimes feature a government speaker. The full schedule and past recordings are on our website under the Playbook tab. Please join us at the Kennedy Center for a night of networking with over 200 federal contractors. Our quarterly event will take place on Monday, June 20th. Sponsorship opportunities are available. Federal agencies will be present and will be listed as they confirm. Please note that ticket prices increase on June 13th. We hope to see you there. Now we would like to thank our sponsors who make the webinar series possible. We'd like to thank the Virginia PTAC. The Virginia PTAC is based out of GMU in Fairfax and offers free one-on-one counseling to firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. If you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to explore what PTACs can offer. And a special thanks to the Federal Business Council. The FBC creates and manages virtual and in-person meetings, events, to connect appropriate industry and government thought leaders, product providers, and solutions with government programs that use them. The FBC works within mission-specific programs for a variety of agencies to connect government and industry in the form of in-person and virtual conferences, training events, policy dialogue, and outreach. Over the last 40+ years, FBC has become a comprehensive resource for connecting industry and federal government. DASTN is an IT and cloud solutions provider working with corporations, the military, and government agencies to lower their costs, increase scalability, improve operational efficiency, and meet compliance regulations using targeted cloud-based solutions. DASTN is a certified partner of Oracle NetSuite, a premier tier Google Cloud partner, and a certified partner of Cisco, Virtue, AO Docs, and Authenticate. For more information about DASTN services or to schedule a complimentary consultation, please email Joe Alston. His contact information is in the lower left corner of your slide. You can also visit the DASTN website. Thank you again to the attendees and our speaker for joining us today in our FAR supplement series. We are all here today to dig into the FAR supplement on the Department of Labor. Our speaker today is Devin Hewitt, and she represents the firm Pretore. As a reminder, we do not take questions, so if you have questions for Devin, her contact information will be displayed at the end of the presentation and you can contact her directly. Thank you, Devin, for joining us today. I'll put myself on mute, wait for your cue for the next slide. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for everybody for listening. I have done this before, but I don't know if you've listened before. So I will just let you know that I am an attorney located in Tysons. That's where our office is. I'm the senior partner, and I have been in the government contracts field for about 30 years, even though I know I look much younger than that. Next slide. So the way I approach doing these seminars on the supplements is that I look at the FAR and then I look at the supplement and see if there are really interesting departures or amendments or additions unique to the Department of Labor that are, merit discussing in a seminar like this. Oftentimes, the supplements supplement the FAR with just information regarding who within the organization has authority to make a certain delegation or approval, or who, for example, is the head of the contracting activity, etc. So generally, it's not always substantive, the amendments or the supplementary information in these agency supplements. In this case, there weren't many, but I will go over interesting things I found in the supplement. But I also it did something a little different here with the Department of Labor, because I think in addition to knowing the supplementary information substantively as a matter of law in an agency, it's good to know the acquisition organization generally and any other policies or standard operating procedures that the agency use in connection with implementing procurement policies. And some of them obviously will be reflected in the supplement, but some of them are outside the FAR and the supplement, but inform greatly the way an agency approaches acquisition of supplies and services. So with respect to the Department of Labor, the acquisition organization is under the rubric of the Office of the Assistant Secretary for Administrative Management, and in particular, the Office of the Senior Procurement Executive. And within that, there's the Office of Acquisition Services. So that office generally handles all the procurement. There's also the Policy Project Management Division that does research and develops policies for not only DOL, but also government-wide. There's an actual separate cost and price determination division, which is used to do price and cost analysis and also takes the lead in negotiating indirect cost rates. This is somewhat unusual in that a lot of agencies just rely on DCAA, but DOL has its own separate office that does that. And any acquisition organization always includes the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business, which DOL has, and Suspension and Debarment Office, which every agency has as well. We aren't really going to talk about suspension and debarment here, but I just add it to show all the separate offices that are under the Office of the Senior Procurement Executive. Next slide. So with respect to acquisition regulations, guides, and policies, the Department of Labor Acquisition Regulations Supplement is located at 48 CFR Chapter 29. And 29, so the part is known as 2901. So like most agencies, the Department of Labor Acquisition Regulation Supplement is divided into the same parts, subparts, sections, and subsections of the FAR. So part 3 of the FAR, which is conflicts of interest, gratuities, all that, is part 2903 of the DOLR. And the DOLR or dollar or whatever you call it is applicable to all acquisitions of DOL, and the regulations specifically state that the administration of the acquisition regulation supplement falls within the scope of the Office of the Senior Procurement Representative. In addition to that, there is a Department of Labor Board of Contract Appeals. So unlike other agencies, DOL has its own Board of Contract Appeals. Also, the Department of Labor apparently has something called the Department of Labor Manual Series, known as DLMS. Now, the reason I have it highlighted here on this slide in red, and the reason I say that it apparently exists, is because I cannot find it. It is referred to in regulations or other publications related to the Department of Labor, but I cannot find the actual text of the DLMS anywhere. Sometimes I find links, but when I click on the link, it's not there. So it's a bit of a mystery. It is described as internal standard operating procedures, and presumably it should not affect markedly how procurement contractors approach procurements or contracting, but who knows? I throw it out there to let you know that it exists, it's referenced, but I can't tell you too much about the context, which actually is sort of odd, which is why I mention it. Next slide. So 2901, which is sort of the introduction to the Department of Labor acquisition regulation system. Some of this stated in this section is sort of common sense, but it often isn't stated explicitly in other agency supplements, and it is here. The agency supplement here expressly states that only DOL personnel with contracting authority shall obligate DOL to any contract obligation, and only to the extent of that delegation. And in this regard, the head of the contracting activity requests contracting warrants for the contracting officers within that activity. All warrants must be signed by the senior procurement executive, and unlike some other agencies, the list of contracting officers and their contracting warrants are available to the public. A warrant may address not only dollar amount, whether or not a contracting officer can enter into a contract above 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, but also the type of function. Certain contracting officers may only be able to enter into obligations of a certain nature, a certain contract type, etc. Similarly, a contracting officer must issue a written letter of delegation for the COTR. And that letter should delineate the individual's limitations and responsibilities. Interestingly, the letter is supposed to be provided to the contractor, which I have never heard of and certainly have never seen. I'd be interested to know if any of the attendees at this seminar has ever seen something like that. And the supplement states that the COTR is personally liable for any unauthorized commitments that the COTR makes on behalf of the agency. Now, why is authority important, and why is it interesting that it is spelled out so explicitly in the supplement? It is because the government can step away from any commitment that it says it is unauthorized, even if a contractor believes there was authority, or an individual on behalf of the government says he or she has that authority. So sometimes it behooves a contractor to know whether or not a change or a certain contracting modification or implementation is really authorized, and whether it needs to actually be followed, or more importantly, if there is risk associated with that. So that it not only applies to authority that's expressed by individuals in terms of their actions, like a contracting officer or COTR, it also applies to whether or not there's obligated certain dollars from certain accounts. Does the contracting officer who is signing a contract have the funds obligated from the revenue of a particular year? Does it have both budget authority as well the contracting authority? So this is very explicit here, and in a situation where there is doubt, at least the Department of Labor provides a resource and guidance on how authority is determined within the agency. Next slide. Well, Part 3 of the FAR, and similarly Part 2903 of the DOL Acquisition Regulation Supplement, is pretty important for contractors. It addresses improper business practices, conflicts of interest, responsibility matters, also suspension and debarment. So it's pretty chock full of important stuff. With regard to the DOL supplement, however, the only interesting addition to the FAR obligations and responsibilities is that explicitly stated within the supplement is that contracts with former DOL employees is prohibited for a period of 1 year from the severance of duties unless there's an exception. So stated there is that that 1 year cooling off period applies to every DOL employee. Now, there are exceptions as stated, and here I note that the exception could apply for a particular contract, but only when there is a most compelling reason to do so. So that's a fairly high standard, and the way it's written actually is a little bit in the vernacular. So clearly this is an exception that is not interpreted broadly or used frequently. And that exception can only be made by the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management. And that exception decision should follow a review by the Procurement Review Board of DOL, as well as review by the agency ethics official, which is actually within the Office of Legal Counsel. However, the regulation says that if time doesn't permit, then the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management can do so unilaterally. Again, interesting fact, it applies to every DOL employee for 1 year, and there is an exception, but a very rare occasion in which that exception is likely going to be relied on. Next slide. All right, 2906, FAR Part 6 regarding competition. This is the section of the FAR that deals when you can have sole source, how you have to publicize actions, etc. The Department of Labor supplement here says that the contracting officer may approve sole source awards under the simplified acquisition threshold unless the contract is for advisory and assistance services. However, any sole source above the simplified acquisition threshold must be justified and approved by the DOL Procurement Review Board and approved by the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management. Similarly, only the agency head of a contracting activity can determine that a specific brand, make, or model is necessary to satisfy an agency's needs. And again, that's fairly high up. That, for most of you who are in this industry frequently and know about protests, it is very hard to protest a solicitation that includes a specific brand or model that the agency wants, because the GAO will defer to the agency, and particularly if the agency comes up with a reasonable reason for it. But here, the regulation states that that decision has to be screened first by the head of the contracting activity, which is very senior, which indicates that there is a large hurdle for that being put in a solicitation. On the other hand, that also means that if you happen to see that in a solicitation, either it has been vetted thoroughly and there is a good justification, or it could be ripe for protest because perhaps the contracting officer did not get the requisite approval from the agency head of the contracting activity. So it goes either way, which is exactly why I mention this, because it is a unique, at least to this agency, hurdle or step that must be cleared before you can find a make, model, or brand name in the solicitation. The Department of Labor Acquisition Regulation Supplement also provides for a competition advocate, which is appointed by the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management. The competition advocate's focus should be on compliance with the policy for small business programs, and it also serves as DOL's task order and delivery order ombudsman. Next slide. All right, the Department of Labor Acquisition Regulation Supplement with regard to small business and small disadvantaged business concerns. In this particular supplement, and unlike others for other agencies, the supplement explicitly states that the Director of the Office of Small Business Programs is responsible for the management of DOL's use of small and small disadvantaged businesses. That director appoints small business specialists for each contracting office, and all DOL procurements above the simplified acquisition threshold must be reviewed and receive a recommendation by the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the OSBU, before advertising. Now, this is supposed to be done as a matter of policy, and that guidance is provided by the SBA. But often in many agencies, the OSBU, or the Office of Small Business Programs, is not brought into every procurement decision. And certainly I have heard of numerous instances where agencies have gone ahead with an acquisition plan or issued a solicitation without review from anybody representing small business interests or the Office of Small Business, the OSBU, or SBA. And as a result, there may be a protest, but often if there isn't a protest, there is concern about an agency doing that repeatedly and not being sensitive or following the regulations that require acquisitions to be set aside for small businesses if two or more companies can do that work. So what's notable here is that this requirement is explicitly set forth in the supplement, and therefore, if an agency official does not follow this, the agency official actually is violating law and regulation, as opposed to a SBA policy or regulation, which may not be able to get you into a protest before GAO, because typically GAO will not consider matters that are exclusive the province of SBA. But here we're in the acquisition regulations applying to DOL, and as I said, it's explicit and fairly clear. In addition to dealing with the review of prime contracts and prime acquisition strategy, the acquisition supplement also says that the contracting officers must make available a significant number of award points for the quality of a prime contractor's subcontracting plan or good performance against previous subcontracting plan goals or efforts to achieve those goals. So again, there is explicit instructions in the supplement requiring contracting officers in prime other than small not set asides, but unrestricted procurements to take into account use of small businesses and small disadvantaged businesses. Again, this is the general policy of the SBA. It's referred to in the FAR, but in this instance, the DOL makes explicit these instructions, and the failure of a contracting officer to follow this, therefore, is a violation of not only SBA's regs or policies, but also of an acquisition or procurement law or regulation. Interestingly, in addition to those requirements, the acquisition supplement states that contracting officers must conduct periodic evaluations of the performance of Section 8A contracts. And any problems that a contracting officer sees has to be referred to the Office of Small Business Programs. To my knowledge, this is not an explicit requirement in other agencies or other agency supplements with which I am familiar. So again, I think this supplement reflects a more focused and strong commitment to small business, and certainly provides more swords for small business in ensuring that DOL acquisitions are consistent with and follow the policies generically addressed in the FAR and specifically addressed in SBA's regulations. Next slide. Now, believe it or not, that's pretty much all we see with the supplement that I found interesting or notable. And there are some interesting things there. Otherwise, as I mentioned earlier, the supplement is very brief and in some cases completely reserved. And where it is brief, it often talks about who within the organization has the authority to effectuate some reference that's in the FAR. However, what a lot of contractors may not be aware, and what I thought I would add to this presentation, hopefully to give you at least a half hour of good substantive knowledge, is that the Department of Labor is the repository or the home of some significant policies that apply government-wide. And most notably, the Department of Labor is where the Office of Federal Contract Compliance exists. And the OFCCP, which hopefully is a familiar acronym for most of you on the phone here, is the organization that enforces the affirmative action and equal employment opportunity obligations of all federal contractors. And so that includes Executive Order 11246, which talks about equal employment opportunity, Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act, which addresses affirmative action and non-discrimination in contracting, and the Vietnam Era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act, VEVRA, which specifically addresses equal opportunity and affirmative action for veterans. And that in particular is administered by an office within DOL called the DOL's Veteran Employment and Training Service. OFCCP, again, one of my interesting facts, estimates that 25,000 federal contractors are subject to these laws, and that these contractors employ 20% of the American workforce. So that's important, I think, just to know what important and vibrant area government contracts is for our nation, both from an employment and from GDP side, but also to show why the OFCCP is such an important organization, because it takes on the responsibility to effectuate social and economic policies reflected in statutes and in the nation's laws through contractors, and thereby affecting a significant part of the American workforce. And so I think this is just reflective of the synergy between agencies, procurement, and federal and national social and economic policies. Next slide. In addition, for those contractors that perform services contracts, they are within the province of DOL's Wage and Hour Division. And that division administers certain laws affecting employees of government contractors, particularly with regard to wages and benefits. And the laws in particular are the Davis-Bacon Act, which apply to construction contractors, the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act, which applies to contractors providing various types of services at certain dollar levels, and the Walsh-Healy Public Contracts Act, which applies to manufacturing or supply contractors. And so all that enforcement and knowledge and information is within DOL's wage and hour division. Next slide. Finally, the Department of Labor has what it calls a Small Business Regulatory Enforcement Fairness Act Small Business Resource Center. And I did not know this exists. And it's interesting because the mission statement of this resource center is to address and, dare I say, protect small businesses from quote unquote excessive enforcement by a federal agency. So from what I can gather and from reading the materials on this is that this office is designed to help businesses to understand and comply not only with the rules and regulations enforced by the DOL, but enforcement of these rules and other rules by other agencies, the implication being that when an agency focuses specifically or too much on small businesses, that DOL here could come and be of assistance. Again, something that I was not aware of, and a resource that I'm sure many small businesses do not know exists out there. And certainly with certain enforcement actions, certainly by the DOL, which can be, can be extreme, particularly on wage and hour reviews or resume reviews. That's an important thing to note. So, which is why I bring it up as it is something that is going to be an asset, I think, if people are aware of it and have the knowledge to use those resources. I think that's my last slide, but let's see. It is. Well, I got you out of lunch here early, just in a half hour. And if you have any other questions, my contact information is here. And I hope you learned something today that you did not know previously. I can tell you that in doing this presentation, I did, which is one of the ways, this is a good way for me to keep up on what's going on in the government within the various agencies. So I thank Jennifer Schaus for the opportunity, and I hope that I will have the privilege to speaking to you at some point in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you, Devin, for a great presentation. Thank you to all who participated, and the recordings and slides will be available within about 24 hours or less. Just once again, please join us at the Kennedy Center for a night of networking with over 200 federal contractors. Our quarterly event will take place on Monday, June 20th. Sponsorship opportunities are available. Federal agencies will be present and listed as they confirm. Please note that ticket prices increase on June 13th. We hope to see you there. This concludes the webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.